Hi, this is Zach with Worn&Wound. Today we'll be taking a look at the Lou and Huey Riccardo. This is a watch we featured a few months ago when they were running a Kickstarter campaign to support this watch. It was the first watch from the brand, and clearly it got supported, and it's actually gotten quite a bit of a kind of a cult following on forums and what have you. And it's the first watch from this brand. They already have a few more planned, and it's definitely an interesting piece. First off, it's an automatic chronograph that comes in at $550. It uses a Seagull ST1940 automatic column wheel chronograph, which is very cool, not the movement you see very often, and one of the only ways to make an affordable automatic chronograph. And then it has looks that are inspired by vintage rally chronographs and things of that nature, kind of the 60s, 70s style. So there's a lot of interesting little things going on here. Yeah, so let's take a closer look. The case of the Riccardo has a nice, medium-sized sporty design with some interesting features to it that I think are actually very well executed, especially for a watch in this price range. The watch measures 42 millimeters in diameter, about 49 millimeters lug to lug, 15.5 millimeters to the top of the domed sapphire crystal, so it's quite tall, with a 20 millimeter lug width. What you can see pretty clearly that makes this kind of interesting are the twisting lugs here, which is something that brands like Omega is quite famous for on their Speedmasters. So this watch does kind of owe some design aesthetic to watches from that era. So, and I think that was actually a very interesting detail you don't see very often. It's very attractive. It really gives the watch a much more sculptural look than just a flat lug would. And then you have some interesting finishing around there. So this inner portion is polished, and then you have a nice little bevel here that runs up around, and then the actual side of the watch is brushed. So you have a nice little play of finishing there. Then the top of it has just a fairly thick polished bezel, which just also plays off of it well. Coming up at 3 o'clock, you have the crown here. It's a screw-down crown, very graspable. Has a little bit of has one of their little logos on it. That's the Lou and Huey dog logo. And then there's these two chronograph pushers. I actually really love the shape of these. So they are kind of an oblong shape that feels really nice underneath your finger. Obviously you usually see kind of a cylindrical chronograph pusher. So this is a nice little change, and that's something I think Hoyer might have used a few times on like the Monacos and things like that. It looks really, really nice on this watch, so I think that was a smart thing for them to do. Quickly flipping the watch over now, you can see it has a display case back in which you can see the ST1940 movement there, which is a pretty cool looking movement. And then around that are just various details about the watch. The dial of the Riccardo has this kind of very classic chronograph design that definitely speaks to 60s, 70s chronographs, especially with the horizontal bicompax layout here. There's two models of it, one in black and one in blue. We went with the blue model here. It's just you don't see too many blue dial watches, so that'd be fun. And it's a very interesting and strong blue color. It has a metallic kind of sunburst finish, so you can see as I move it around, the light really is dynamic across that surface. And it's a very strong blue. It's almost a royal blue. So you really have to like blue to get into this, but it is a very successful, highly saturated color. Looking at the index now, you have the primary index of applied markers, all with lume in them. There's a just a very classic look to that, and then around that there's a steel or metallic ring with individual minutes or seconds broken down just to the precision of 1 second. I kind of would have liked to have seen actually a little bit of a greater division there, as when you're running a mechanical chronograph, you do have greater precision than to a single second. So it would have just been nice to show that off, or have maybe a tachometer ring or something like that. On this chapter ring on the outside, then you just have numerals for every 5 minutes, 5 seconds. Though I do like how the blue, silver blue plays off. That is a nice look. The two subdials here at 3 o'clock, you have the 30-minute totalizer for the chronograph, and then at 9 you have the active seconds, both executed in a very kind of simple way that reminiscent of the whole dial. So you have a silver ring around a blue central area. They also have a little extra texturing of kind of a concentric circular graining to play with the light even more. They're both very clear and easy to read. One thing about the dial, and I think I talked about this when we first talked about the watch, is that it does have a very prominent logo, this Lou and Huey logo with this very large dog. And I think that's kind of a, make it or break it kind of detail for some people. It's a very, very graphic and aggressive logo design, but it's also very fun and very original. So on one hand, you have something that's very memorable and very distinct to the brand. On the other hand, it's maybe just a little bit too much. For me personally, I think I like that logo on the crown, and on other places it shows up like the clasp here, but maybe on the logo could have been a little bit, on the dial could have been a little bit smaller, but once again, that's kind of splitting hairs. Looking at the hands, and you have these very large steel polished hands with lume filling on them for the hour and minute. Then for the chronograph or the sub-registers, you have simple stick red hands which jump out of the dial nicely. And then you have the chronograph seconds hand here, which is a red stick as well, but with this kind of funny little wavy tail end, which is also kind of plays off of their logo design, which was, I think a nice way to just kind of add that in there. Powering the Riccardo is kind of an interesting movement, the Seagull ST1940 column wheel chronograph. We've seen similar movements, the ST19 and ST, I believe 1921, something like that, which were in the Seagull 1963 watches. It is an interesting movement because it's very closely based on a movement by Venus from the 60s, so it kind of is like, a vintage movement brought back to life, and it's a column wheel chronograph, which you really just don't see in this price range at all. Here you can see the column wheel just at the top, which is just a more complicated and I believe harder to manufacture version of a chronograph. And then the main difference between this one and the other ones is that it is an automatic winding, as you can see the rotor here. It's a very complex looking movement, lots of active parts, blued screws, some decoration. It's a 33 joule movement also, and it has a beat per hour of 21,600. And then just showing you very quickly how it works. Works like any other chronograph. Start and stop with the pusher at 2 o'clock and reset with the pusher at 4. The one thing I don't love about these movements that we've seen or felt really is that they don't have the nicest click or action on the chronograph buttons, especially on the reset. It's just a little bit soft, and I really like that pop you sometimes feel with chronographs, but otherwise totally functional. On the wrist, the Riccardo wears, I think, very, very nicely for a nice, for a good size sporty chronograph. 42 millimeters is, I think, a really good size for a larger watch. But then the diameter is also tempered by the not too long lug to lug, so it fits well on a 7-inch wrist here. I also think it looks a little smaller because of the contours of the twisted lugs, just kind of, they make it feel a little bit smaller. It's just an illusion, but it works towards something that's a little bit more streamlined and, just a little bit better proportions. And then the look of the watch, it's a cool looking watch in its own way. It's very bold. It's a little bit vintage. The blue color, honestly wasn't sure how to feel about it, and I don't really wear a lot of blue watches, but it is nice. It's definitely, it has a richness to it. I think it looks really nice with a brown leather like they have here. And I have a dark gray shirt on, and I actually think that works quite nicely. And then also, for people who like brighter watches in the summer, I think this is kind of have a, summery kind of a look to it. Yeah, and it's just very bold and fun looking watch. The strap it comes with is this kind of honey brown leather strap. The quality of this is okay. It's not great. The stitching is a little bit irregular on it, but it's not like a faulty strap or anything like that. Also, the second keeper here is like a little oversized. You see it just kind of falls away. But it does come on a deployment clasp, which is nice. So, that's obviously just makes getting it on and off really easy. And just one thing to show you, it does have the little Lou and Huey logo there. And there, I think it's really cool. It's just like a nice little detail that just brings the, the clasp to life a little bit. To wrap up, the Lou and Huey Riccardo, I think is a very cool first watch from this new brand. I like that they kind of pushed what they, could do a little bit and found these, found this movement that not a lot of people are using in order to make an affordable automatic chronograph. I think overall the execution is very nice, and especially on the case. I really like the twisted lugs, and the finishing is nice and clean. The dial is pretty cool. It's pretty simple. Like I said, there are a couple things I wish for my personal taste, were a little bit different, but it's not an unattractive dial, and I think the blue is actually a very nice looking blue with a nice finishing to it. So yeah, I mean, overall, I think this is a very successful watch. Also a good price, so $550, sapphire crystal, cool column wheel automatic movement in it that seems to be working quite well. They're also a limited edition, 150 of each colorway, and I just looked it up the other day, and according to his site, there's actually only about 20 of these left at the time of recording this video, so they're selling quick. So they are collectible in that way. So yeah, please read the full review on Worn&Wound. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Tumblr. Thank you.